Well, I've been looking forward to this. So the BBC have been reported to Ofcom over the refusal of the broadcaster to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. 5 lawyers wrote to the regulator and accused the broadcaster of failing to show impartiality beyond doubt, urging Ofcom to investigate the BBC. But what's next for the BBC? Have they fallen well below the standards expressed in their editorial values? It appears that Ofcom have no intention of getting involved as it currently stands. But I'm joined now by Barrister Jeremy Brier, who wrote, along with a few other people, of course, this complaint letter to Ofcom. Thank you very much for joining me. Great to have you on the show. So why did you feel compelled to do that?
Well, Patrick, let me be very clear why. We all woke up in the Jewish community and in the wider community on Saturday morning, witnessing scenes of really unparalleled tragedy, a massacre of 1,000 innocent people, many women, children, babies, as we've now found out, by Hamas in Israel. So the scale of what we saw was horrendous, the worst terrorist attack, I think, since 9/11, as it's been described. And yet we also then had to suffer the secondary indignity of not having it reported accurately. So we switch on our national broadcaster, as people do sometimes when they're not watching GB or any of the other stations, and they see that these people that have perpetrated these outrages against innocents are being described in this sort of slightly sanitized language of militant group, as though they're a sort of local have-a-go hero freedom fighter, as opposed to a group that is as bad as ISIS in every respect.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the usual lovey types are ominously quiet over this as well. I mean, Gary Lineker is suspiciously silent. But is this the first time that the Jewish community has felt let down by the BBC? I sense not.
No, I think that this description, this use of language has been ruminated upon previously, and there have been all sorts of discussions that have gone on behind the scenes, but it has never been so egregiously felt as this weekend. I mean, I fully appreciate that a national broadcaster is in a difficult situation, that it has journalists on the front line and that it has a number of competing interest groups. But there are some things in life that are very clear. And Hamas being a terrorist group is not just clear to normal human beings, it's a matter of law. They're a proscribed group as a matter of statute under the Terrorism Act. And all of your viewers, I would say, all of your viewers will realise and will see instantly that a group that beheads babies are terrorists. And describing them in this way is deeply offensive.
Yeah, so go on then. Why do you think the BBC is so reluctant to call this what it is? What is it about the BBC, do you think? What is it about the editorial charter?
I can only speculate, because I mean, my expertise is in the law, not in the media. But I suppose they've been trying very hard to keep everybody happy in some way, and therefore they think using certain types of language is the right thing to do. But interestingly, as I pointed out in the letter that we wrote yesterday, when you actually depart from the true, accurate legal word, which is terrorist, you become partial. It's impartial to use the accurate word. The accurate word is terrorist. That's the legal word. Hamas are a prescribed terrorist group. So when you actually choose to not use that word, you step into the arena yourself and actually become a side taker. So ironically, the BBC have really done exactly what they set out not to do. They wanted to please everyone, and they've actually ended up taking sides.
I can definitely see that school of thought. Can I just read you the latest that I've got here anyway from Ofcom? Just get your reaction to this. Look, and for what it's worth as well, I am, as I'm sure you can appreciate, not always in the business of calling for increased Ofcom action, but Ofcom are saying the responsibility for journalistic editorial guidelines rests with each broadcaster, provided they meet Ofcom rules on due accuracy in news and due impartiality in news and current affairs. It is for broadcasters to decide the vocabulary they use to describe unfolding events. My interpretation of that is Ofcom have basically said, this is for the BBC to do what they want, and they obviously don't want to call Hamas terrorists.
Well, let's see about that, because the critical thing in that letter, or that statement, was provided they meet the impartiality guidelines that they have to meet. And the letter that I wrote, along with Lord Panic and Lord Grabbanner and Lord Wolfson and Lord Pollock. I'm the only non-lord, as you'll have probably noted, but still. Patrick, we said very clearly in that letter, you have this responsibility to be impartial. When you choose to use the less accurate word, the sanitized word, the watered down word, that's not impartial. That's actually stepping into the debate and taking sides.
Yeah, indeed. All right. So do you want an apology from the BBC then?
Not really. I'm not particularly interested in apologies. I'm interested in accurate reporting going forwards. I want the British public to understand that Israel is facing a terrorist organisation and a terrorist threat, much like ISIS. I don't really want to enter into the politics any further than that. Yeah. I want to simply make sure that the British public understand what's really going on.
Yeah, no, fair enough. There appears to be... in light of the fact that in the last half hour or so, Israel's Twitter account and Israeli leadership has decided to take the unprecedented step of publishing some incredibly graphic pictures, which obviously we're not going to do here now, of babies, etc., because there was this clamour for proof that to prove that the Israelis were not lying about some of the atrocities that were committed by Hamas. A clamour that I don't think has existed in previous conflicts or when previous groups of people have made claims. Are you concerned about that? There seems to be a non-belief, really, of these claims by Israel. I just wonder what you think that kind of says about the attitudes maybe towards Israel, towards Israelis.
Yes, I think that's a very fair point. It was quite extraordinary, wasn't it, when these revelations came to light, I think yesterday, about decapitated babies and teenagers that have been raped in terrible circumstances, many abducted and murdered. And the first response of some of the armchair warriors on social media who love to try and hold Israel to a double standard is to say, oh no, it can't possibly be true. Where's the evidence? No one should publish any of this. Well, they asked, and the evidence has now been provided. So I look forward to all those people now saying, well, thank you for providing the evidence. I fully accept that what Israel said was true, because it was, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately, and demonstrably true in shockingly graphic detail. I'm afraid. Well, go on. Yeah.
Sometimes we just can't believe as human beings what other human beings are capable of. And I'm afraid with Hamas, you have that in spades, in bucket loads. And that's why it's so important that we call them what they are.
Yeah, you mentioned the law, clearly, throughout the context of this conversation. One of the concerns that I would have going forward, I'm sure plenty of people do have going forward, is this so-called International Day of Jihad, or whatever they want to call it, tomorrow, which is supposed to be limited to the Arab world. I think, given the fact that we've seen instances in London, in Sheffield, in Australia, in America, in Berlin, probably, but quite possibly now in France, actually, which we're thinking of going to a bit later on, the Netherlands, take your pick, basically. Throw a dart at the map of the world, and there's probably been some quite fruity behaviour taking place there in the last few weeks, or the last few days, I should say. The police, I think, need to be acutely aware of the powers that they have when it comes to people supporting a terror group, right? I would imagine that's something that you want to see them exercise. Is that right?
Absolutely, Patrick. I mean, this so-called Day of Jihad undoubtedly has spread fear through the Jewish and wider communities in our country. We're horrified by some of the things that we've seen on the streets. And as I know, most right-thinking members of the public are Jewish or non-Jewish, because I've been inundated with correspondence to that effect. And what I say really is, I really hope the police are listening. They've been warned. We need the police. We need them to act. We don't need them standing there, taking selfies, discussing the matter, thinking about things. We need them to act to protect our children.
Yeah, you've got to get people wrapped up and moved on ASAP, really, before the kind of rot sets in, I think. But look, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Great to have you on the show. And obviously, good luck with everything going forward. That is Barrister Jeremy Brier, who was one of the people who wrote that complaint to Ofcom.